Well folks, we are kicking off my review for all 5 cars, of course, in the Christmas update of Gran Turismo 7 with, first off, probably, arguably, the most significant new car of the 5, and a car which, at least here on the channel, I've definitely seen more comments about than pretty much anything else apart from maybe a Lexus LF-A, and that is of course this one, the C8 Corvette Stingray. We finally have a production mid-engine Corvette in real life, and it was a matter of time really before it arrives in Gran Turismo. Gran Turismo as a series has always represented Corvettes pretty damn well for a game that tends to favour Japanese cars, because stuff like the C5s, the C6, the C7 more recently, they are fantastic cars in the game, and even the older ones can be made into weapons in the right hands with the right tuning and for the right circumstance. This is a different kind of Corvette altogether. The mid-engine changes everything, and of course Zora would be proud. He campaigned for that for many years, and now the Corvette is closer to being a GT40 than it is to being a Viper, as it used to be. What about in terms of performance though? Because with so many people clamouring for it, it's got a lot to live up to. That's the downside. Much like a newer shaped Supra, the legendary status of the car means that it has so much more weight on its shoulders. So what is this Corvette like in the game? Well, it's very good straight off the bat, that's for sure. It's cheap at 85,000 credits. The point level isn't particularly high at 585, but part of the reason why is because the power isn't all that high. Much like the C7 Stingray, it's pretty modest, just under 500 horses, which, when you put it that way, sounds pretty good, but these days 500 horsepower doesn't really sound like what it used to be, and the weight is also very reasonable at around 3,500 pounds, 1,530 kilos. Of course, mid-engine, rear-wheel drive, and in the case of this one, naturally aspirated. Now, one of the things I do like about the idea, and about the actual construction and design of the C8, is that technically we had like a sneak peek of this car years before it came along, in the form of the Daytona Corvettes, the GTP cars, which look very similar to the C8 Corvette, except they came out years before this thing did, and it's striking actually how similar they look. Now, in terms of performance with less than 500 horses, you shouldn't necessarily expect it to be an all-conquering, world-destroying force, but the potential of any Corvette is always there, and I will say it's a pleasure to work with. Now, I've seen a couple of people say that they find it a bit slippery on the back end. That's fair enough, each to their own, but you've got to remember it is a Corvette after all, so, American performance cars aren't really known for not sliding around, so any car that doesn't is usually an exception rather than a rule. That's why stuff like the Corvette and the Viper are so good. They are very bare-bones cars compared to many European and certainly Japanese rivals, which tend to favour a more technical approach to the analogue approach of America. But I've got to admit, I'm a fan of analogue. With an analogue approach, it tends to force you to rely on engineering more than technology, and it means that the car has less to go wrong, which allows you to focus more on just pure performance. And that fact is borne out by how good Corvettes and Vipers were in the racing world. They are kind of hot rods, but they're fantastic for it. Now, this one feels definitely closer to a technical approach. The C7 Stingray began more of that trend. This one even more so. It feels more like a digital age Corvette. Some purists probably won't like that. For me, the only thing I don't like about the C8 is the looks. I find it, especially from the back end, to just be a little bit too boxy, a bit too square for me, but that's purely a personal preference thing. In terms of tuning within the game, you've got some pretty nice visual mods. You could turn it into like a ZR1, Z06 kind of thing. You could even turn it into a C8R race car light if you wanted to, with the wide arch kit, racing tyres, etc. And in terms of tuning, any Corvette has great potential, so no surprises there. Plus, as if all of its ability and the fact that people would pretty much pay anything for it in the game, the fact that it is so much cheaper than, for example, the ZR1 that's already in the game is just a bonus. It's not as quick as a ZR1, but still, being super cheap, just like the C8 was in real life at like 60 grand from Chevy themselves, at least before scalpers get their hands on them, it is a remarkable value for money performance car. It kind of reminds me of what Nissan did back in 2007 when the R35 GTR first came out. That, being a £60,000 machine, was ridiculous value for money, and the Corvette is just that as well. I think that this is the kind of car where if you have been clamouring for it to be in the game, I don't think there's much to be disappointed by in terms of just the performance. There are always little things that we might want to change. I saw somebody mention, for example, having the stripe kit as one of the paint options, but again, you could do that in the livery editor. I'm sure people already have. The body modifications are pretty good. Performance mods make a world of difference to any Corvette. It goes from great to outstanding very quickly. And yeah, I think the fact that it is a mid-engine Corvette addition to the game, as well as in real life, it does mean that it doesn't just keep replicating the same, admittedly good formula, it actually changes things up. So for those who do want the traditional ability of a Corvette, but with a more distinctly Italian, almost kind of vibe, the C8 is probably a prime car for you. For me, I'm still more of a C6 kind of guy, maybe even C7 in some cases, but the C8 definitely deserves a place in the pantheon of legendary vets, and even in its Stingray form here, there is a lot to love. So give me your thoughts down below. Do you like the car? Do you think it is a good addition? Or maybe are you disappointed by it? I could see people who have wanted it for so long maybe expecting something of the car that it can't deliver. So that's it for my thoughts. Give me yours down below, and of course stick around over the next few days for the rest of the reviews of the cars in this pack. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.